the site's placeholder things, it doesn't really matter.
Oh, okay. So this will just show up in your stream.
Yeah, it's doing a live stream right now.
Oh, okay, cool.
So yeah, it looks like we're live. So Prophet of Zod, thank you for taking the time to come on and have a conversation with me. I really appreciate it. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Um, yeah, I make YouTube videos. I guess that's what people already know going into this. But yeah, I am just a content creator, have been for about, I think I'm going on 4 years now. Um, just got dragged into making YouTube videos somehow, and so I do that. The rest of it's my personal life, which is probably boring, but
4 years, that's quite a while. What got you interested in creating a YouTube channel to begin with?
um, so I started off when I was first coming out of religion. I started just randomly watching a few things like the standards like Non-Stamp Collect, Logic, Mr. Atheist back when he was more worth watching for this kind of content. And that piqued my interest a little bit. And then my brother actually had a channel, and he, as soon as he found out kind of where I stood, he showed me his stuff and got me into writing things for his channel. And then eventually that just launched me off into doing my own thing once he kind of drifted off with it.
Awesome. So you said you converted from you were a Christian and you became an atheist. What caused you to lose your faith?
Boy, there's not really a quick, interesting answer to that, I don't think. It's as mundane as the fact that there's no evidence for it at all. And you just kind of slowly come to grips with that. I think it's a pretty typical thing a lot of us former non-believers do, or former believers do. Um, you get indoctrinated into it from a young age, as I had. So I had been a Christian from the time I was, as long as I could remember, basically. And you learn to rationalize and cover things up. And gradually that kind of came unraveled in my mind. And it just reached the point where finally I held it in for a long time. And then finally I just reached the point where socially and for other reasons I was ready to acknowledge it to myself. And it just kind of came undone then.
How old were you when that happened? Was it like you said it was a long time? It took a long time for it to like really process into you.
Yeah, I was, boy, 38 or something.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was like a year or two before I started my channel. I was still pretty fresh once I started writing stuff for my brother and then doing my own thing. But I would say I was more or less a non-believer for about 10 years before then. I don't know if you've had that experience, but you just kind of drift off and on. You kind of in and out of it. You try to convince yourself. Even up to a year or two before then, I was in one of my stages where I had just gotten divorced and I had kids and stuff, and I wanted some kind of stability for all of us. And so you kind of latch onto it, and you might know you're doing it, but you also and so it really is. It just kind of you fade up and down in waves, and yeah. So it's a long journey. I think it's a typical thing most of us do in our process of coming out is just kind of slowly fade out of it. And then I think being out of a marriage where we had gone in Christian gave me a little bit more of the freedom to just acknowledge where I was coming from. And telling my kids was, I think, the hardest thing I've ever done, but it all worked out more or less.
So is your family still religious? Your wife and your kids, or your ex-wife and kids?
Um, that's hard to answer. Um, and I don't necessarily want to answer it for all of them publicly. One of my kids who has just become an adult, he's pretty open about being a non-believer. But yeah, beyond that, I don't know if I want to say too much more about it,
Fair
just
enough.
because they're all in their process of, where they're at and how public they want to be.
Yeah. So you used to work for your church, right? What did you used to do?
Um, I was more or less the principal of the school, and I say more or less because that's a really weird, nebulous job. If anybody's ever worked in Christian education, but yeah, I basically ran the school, kind of. The pastor and his wife are very hands-on, but yeah, um, they said, why don't you? be the administrator for our school, schedule all the sports, do all the discipline, all that stuff, and we'll maybe have you teach a class or two. And it turned up me teaching a full class load, basically all the core classes for the high school, with a prep hour and an administrative hour, they called it. So, yeah, it was a nightmare.
Wow. So the pastor was running the school. He was your boss.
Yeah, his wife was kind of, I think it was kind of chain of command was me to his wife to him. She was what they called the superintendent, I think, at one point. It was all kind of fuzzy, but essentially that's very much um, a dictatorial family run organization. Um,
Did,
so yeah, he told me do your thing. You want people to take initiative, but then whenever I did, I would find them coming and telling me what to do otherwise. So
and how long did you do that for?
2 years, which is the average career expectancy of a Christian school administrator, from what I've heard.
Do you like working with kids a lot? Being a teacher?
I do. Um, that's a complicated question if you've ever been in education. I like working with kids. I think I would have liked it better if I'd gone into elementary education because they just relate to me better for some reason or take to me better. Um, but working in a structured educational environment is very, very difficult. Very little of what you do is teaching. It's more corralling and dealing with discipline nonsense and stuff. And the odds are kind of stacked against you from the start if you're a teacher.
Yeah, my dad's a teacher and he teaches high school also, and high school kids are just the worst. So yeah, I can understand why you would want to just anything other than that would probably be preferable.
Yeah, when I was working in the public schools, literally from ninth to 10th grade, you could expect at least half of those students to just sit there and fail the class and they just not do any work. And so when you have a room where half the people are not doing work and the rest of them, for the most part, are barely doing any work, a room full of idle teenagers, there's not really a lot you can do with that situation. So,
Yeah. So right now you said you're doing like what telecommunications or organizing stuff for a company. You're telling me earlier.
yeah, yeah, I work for a local communications company up here, and it's called Supply Chain. It's a really weird amorphous department, and they're adding and taking duties away from us. And I don't know how at all to answer questions about that without being extremely boring.
Fair enough.
But it's it's not an excel, but it gives me the rigid hours and the freedom to do YouTubing the way I want to. Not exactly doing it full time would be ideal, but it's not like I'm always have a phone to my hip and I'm on call and dealing with constant stress. So it lets me compartmentalize and do this when I want to.
What is your schedule for working on YouTube? How do you fit that into your life?
So essentially, almost all of my work time is on, because I work Wednesday through Saturdays, and almost all my work time is on Mondays and Tuesdays when my kids are at school and I have the house empty for the most part. So I scramble really hard to write like on lunch breaks or in spare bits of time. And then my main workflow is Monday morning. I get up as early as I can and try to record and edit my vocals, and then do the miming and the acting and everything, or the editing and everything, the day or two after that.
A lot of your videos have animations and cartoons in them. Do you do those personally? And have you been affected by the COPA thing, the Child Protection Act, at all?
For the first one, I don't animate myself. I use what's called Go Animate, which is why they look kind of just two dimensional and a little bit lame, to be honest. But it's better than back when I was trying to draw them by hand in MS Paint. But yeah, so I use Go Animate, and I make individual characters and individual elements, and then I piece them together and do a lot of the movements within Premiere Pro. And so, yeah, that's how I do that. As far as the COPA thing, I haven't to my knowledge, and it doesn't look like it should affect me. I'd seen on Twitter, Dark Matter, he had asked a lawyer friend about this situation, and they said, your material is clearly not meant for children. So that's where it stands as far as I can tell.
Yeah, because
I
I
can't
find
I can't tell if you watch even a few minutes of any of my cartoons. I think it should be pretty clear they're not targeted at children. Whether they can be construed as something that would draw children at a glance, maybe, but there's not a lot you can do about that.
yeah, I was watching. I think Dark Matter made like a video where he said he was like ending the channel because all his videos were demonetized because they were cartoons, which were like under the labeled under the child thing or something. I was like, that's really concerning.
Oh wow, I should watch that
Yeah,
because all I'd seen was his tweet.
yeah, it's that child protection agency has had a big impact on a lot of people, a lot of content creators because YouTube is being overzealous as usual with their bans and strikes and things. Have any had any of that like with YouTube demonetizing your videos?
Oh yeah, I had a huge ongoing thing where my whole channel wasn't monetized until it's been under a year.
Wow.
And the biggest frustration and the biggest unnerving thing about working in YouTube is that there's a huge field of content creators, obviously. I mean, there's thousands and thousands of us, ranging from a couple hundred channels. I'm still on the lower end of them up until, the really big time people. And so there's no way that a human staff can reasonably monitor and staff all this stuff. And so it's all done by AI, which I think most people know. And so they keep trying to put on controls and create rules to make things more advertiser friendly or prevent harassment and stuff like that, which some of that can be good goals. But the problem is we all end up at the mercy of AIs who automatically flag things based on keywords and things like that. And so it's an ongoing challenge trying to navigate what the computers are going to flag and things like that. And so yeah, my channel was not monetized. There's no recourse if they just simply don't monetize you. And all you can do is sit there and wait until I sent, I don't know, like a half dozen emails every couple of months. I'd say, hey, you guys still haven't checked on me. Is there anybody who can take a look at this? And all you can do is just wait and hope that they rule in your favor on something. I, for the most part now, I think I'm at like 50% monetization for my videos. Um, and a lot of times they'll be flagged as not advertiser friendly, and I'll ask for a review, of course, and then they give me one. But the problem is they always give you one 3 to 4 days after your video launched, at which point you're not going to get any revenue out of it anyway. So
Right, because all the viewers come in within like the first day, first 2 days.
yeah, so
Yeah.
I've just never counted on ad revenue.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry to hear that. That would. So you depend more on like Patreon, PayPal stuff.
Yeah, to the extent that I count on money coming from this, that's what I count on for the most part.
Yeah.
And it's by far, even if you're monetized, that's by far the better income stream.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And
So
so,
do you have like a favorite type of Christian to go after? And are there any kinds of Christians that you respect and really think they're not as bad, essentially?
that is a hard question. There clearly are Christian people I respect. I mean, there are some all around me, including some of my family members. And do you respect someone? That's a complicated question. I might respect them as a person, and I think we should respect everybody on some level. But do I respect many public figures in the religion? It's hard for me to say that I really clearly respect most people who would get to the point of being a Christian celebrity because I think it's always a mix of you think you're doing something honest and you kind of just get drawn into something, but there's a feedback loop. You get rewarded for doing things that are somewhat sleazy or somewhat manipulative, and either consciously or unconsciously you feed into that. And so I can't really say this sounds like a really broad generalization, but I can't really say that I respect any Christian public figure for what they do. I might respect them as a person. If I could sit down and talk to them, I might like them. But it's hard to say that I really respect any of them from what I've seen. Some might be better than others, but it's hard to tell.
Yeah, that's fair enough. So from my perspective, I was recently asked that question in a Christian atheist group that came together. The Christians gave us a list of questions, and one of them was, "Are there any theists you respect?" And I kind of had the same response. I was like, I don't know. I mean, thinking about the public figures, it's hard to say you respect them for their ideas because what they're saying is pretty hard to accept. The arguments are not really very compelling. Or are there any good arguments that you think, from your perspective, or pretty much are they all just terrible?
Yeah, it's hard to answer these questions in a way that makes you feel nuanced or like you're giving people a fair shot. But I really see this is a really strange phenomena because in any situation you should feel like you can articulate a good version of somebody's argument, or you should say
The Steelman.
basically we're just on opposite sides of a coin. I don't agree with them, but I can see where they're coming from and we're all reasonable. But we have a really weird situation in the atheist Christian thing, basically fairy tale beliefs and totally irrational things that nobody would ever buy into if it was just if the idea was poofed out of thin air, someone came up to you and told you about it, you would just laugh at them. But it's institutionalized and it's part of people's lives growing up. And so it's given this artificial level of respect and standing in our society, but they're for ideas that I don't think deserve any respect whatsoever and don't even have any reasonable basis. I think the closest to the best thing I can think people do, and I think it's just something they do when they're backed into a corner, is some version of one, we should have the right to believe what we want. That's not really an argument for it. That's more a legal justification, I guess. But then two is that there are all these mysteries for where things come from, where our feelings come from, just where the universe generally came from. Um, why do we love? Why do we feel awe? All these things. And I think those can be deconstructed to the point where you can demonstrate that somebody's just being mystified by their own feelings. But the argument where you fall back to that and say, hey, these things are kind of mysterious. You might have an explanation for them. I have an explanation for them. Somehow we have to explain where these things came from. That's the closest thing to anything Christians say that I can respect as far as justifying where they come from.
I actually really like one of their arguments, the contingency argument, where it says that everything that began to exist has a cause, and so there has to be some necessary grounds of everything. And I really like that argument. I think it's totally true. I just don't think the ground is a god. I think there's just some natural, fundamental thing out there that we don't know about yet. What do you think about that argument?
That would be that would probably be one of the ones that are more on the respectable side, and that they're appealing to something that I think both that and the one I'm talking about are appealing to the same thing. And I think that the first cause or contingency argument is kind of a subset of what I'm talking about, where there's a mystery there and we need an explanation for it, is what they're saying. Um, so I'd say that's probably one of the better ones too, but I say that very begrudgingly because I find it obnoxious and I have a personal distaste for it. Especially having seen William Lane Craig recite it verbatim over and over. I think one reason I don't like it is because it takes a very audacious step. The obvious one is going from something to a god and then to my particular god. But there are a lot of little things in there that it makes sense on the surface, but right beneath there are all these little things that it's taking advantage of. People's intuition about cause and effect and how it works, generalizing that onto the beginning of the universe. Clearly, our intuition breaks down at some point. I think they see it happen with quantum physics. I don't know enough to say anything confident about that whatsoever, but that's my understanding. But then somewhere, either you're going to lead to an infinite regress or you're going to lead to a point where something unintuitive happened, but there's no justifiable reason at all to say that it was a god or especially anybody's particular god.
Yeah, for sure. Do you research a lot into the physics and the biology and the history and that kind of stuff? Are you really interested in the science behind the arguments?
Honestly, no. And it's something I feel a little guilty about I think we all feel this, like you wonder if you're just creating fluff or if you're taking shortcuts. But honestly, I don't know science. I was an English teacher. Sorry, excuse me one second. And my background was in like English and language and literature and stuff. So I really am behind the curve when it comes to science. Um, but the other part of it is I don't think that's the most effective way to address Christians and people who believe, because I think you're really stepping into territory that's advantageous for apologists at that point, because most it takes us a lot to get to the point where we understand it, and you're getting into muddy areas where your audience is going to be tripping over its own intuition, and especially a Christian audience is going to be vulnerable to people who appeal to it. And so anything, whether it's science, textual criticism, the history of text, and things like that, when you start digging into the nitty gritty details, you're getting into stuff that's very hard to communicate to people. And then when you're dealing with believers, they want to believe already. And so an apologist who gets up there and just stirs things up and muddies the waters, it's going to be very easy for them to argue with you there. So I like to, as terrible and lazy as it sounds, I like to keep things very much on the surface, because I think that's where most of the tricks are played. And with my background being in language, I like to just pick through and look at the little tricks of language that apologists use, because that's when you can really catch them with their pants down and show the audience, look, I've just deconstructed this thing William Lane Craig said. It's nonsense for very obvious reasons. You don't need to draw your audience into an understanding of textual history or physics or anything like that. And so that's where I prefer to operate.
Can you give
And
us
I
an
don't,
example? And you said that you don't find science the most effective route. What do you think is the most effective route? Like talking specifically about the Bible, immorality, contradictions, those kinds of things.
I think that is, yes. One of my most popular early series was my remedial Bible lessons, where basically all I did was I would have a topic from the Bible. I would talk about what Christians today believe about it, and then just explore what the Bible actually says and show that it's different from what Christians actually believe. Also, yeah, biblical contradictions, just plain absurdities in the Bible. Um, People have often, and you've probably heard this too, they accuse you of cherry picking or,
That's not what the Bible really says. You have to
yeah,
read it in context.
or there's either that if you're dealing with fundamentalists, or there's a big group of people that say, well, why do you pick on the Bible by taking it literally? Like somebody made a comment to Non-Stamp Collector and he posted it on you. I don't know if you saw that on Twitter. He goes, well, why don't you just pick on the fact that little pigs can't build houses? When are you going to make a video about that? He's like, well, nobody's taking the three little pigs seriously. We're dealing with a society full of people who takes the Bible 100% literal and tries to pass laws and everything based on that and shame people and things like that. So we don't address biblical literalism because we think it's fun, and we don't pick on the Bible just because we're so obtuse that we don't understand symbolism. It's because we're dealing with people who don't see it symbolically. And so that's just kind of what we're left dealing with. So I think I dovetailed off what you were asking me. But yeah, dealing with the Bible directly, it's hard to come up with examples, but um, if you watch my response videos, I think you'll notice I usually go to, I interrupt a lot in response videos, but I think people might find annoying. But apologists work really fast and they pack things in really quickly, especially at the beginning. And so if you can just show the audience what the person is clearly doing and break it down by word, I'm being very vague because it's hard to give examples, but one of my favorite examples was when I was on Vice Rhino's channel. I did a guest spot there, and I talked about William Lane Craig's addressing the Euthyphro dilemma, and just showing. I just broke it. It was like a minute-long video, but I broke it down in really painstaking detail and showed this is what he did here, this is what he did here. He's trying to separate God's nature from his will, because that's what he says. If it's the will of the gods, it's arbitrary. If it comes from outside the gods, then it's not based on God, but it's God's nature. And so if you just sift through that and show that, number one, he's just a person's nature and their will are tied together. Their nature just flows from their will. And so you're just arguing the same thing in different terms. And then number two, all he's doing is cycling through hand-picked attributes of God that we already approve of for secular reasons and saying those come from God and God's necessary for them. Doing things like that, I think, shows in an intuitive way that's very hard to question unless someone's really digging in. They show some really obvious flaws in the Christian argument, where in most cases, I think it breaks down before you get to the science. And so you can say, hey, even if before we even address this science, even if this is true about tech, even if you grant things up to this level, it fails before you get here. And I think that's the best way to argue. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, for sure. There's this question that was asked by two Christopher Hitchens that I really like. It's if you could get rid of all religious belief in the world, would you do it?
That's a complicated question, I think, because first off, what does that question mean? Does it mean I snap my fingers and there's no more churches and pre-established religion is gone? If you do that, something else stupid is going to take its place. And I think we're in the process of seeing that happen anyway. I think organized religion is hemorrhaging numbers. People are falling into more other forms of quacky, new agey things. So I don't really know. If you suddenly made it disappear, people could argue that even atheists might argue that former Christians wouldn't have their grounding, their moral grounding, and that would disrupt them and everything and lead to all kinds of confusion. Excuse me. But I don't know.
You said you said that if we got rid of all religion, we'd see it replaced with something silly, and we're seeing that happen today. What did you mean by that?
I think we're becoming a lot more secular, mostly just because of open information in the internet. It's almost become trite to say that, but it's true. A pastor can't just show up and speak to a captive audience of people who will barely have access to a library or books and say what he wants, and it goes without question. Any kid who hears a pastor pass on an urban legend or give a specious argument or whatever can immediately after church or even during church, if he wants to, Google things and find answers. And that's destroying the monopoly on information that religion kind of relies on. And so it's losing followers, but being replaced by other things. I think the downside of the internet is people who believe really crazy things. Like, I don't know if there's an upsurge in it, but it feels like there's an upsurge in the
Flat Earth?
amount of and intensity of, like, flat earthers, people who believe in just the weirdest, craziest conspiracy theories. It's without the internet, they sit there and maybe find a couple friends or whatever. And I don't think the ideas gain as much traction and have the ability to get crazy. When all these people can find each other and cooperate and play off each other, refine the excuses for what they believe, I think that you end up with a whole other kind of crazy. And it seems to me that when religion can't hold its iron grasp over what people believe, a lot of people fall away, but then they drift out. Some of them, I think, become more rational. I think that realistically does happen. Some drift off into other weirder things, or not weirder, but they feel more weird because we're not familiar with them. And then a lot of others, I think, just get radicalized. I think you end up with a small fringe that becomes more and more angry, more and more threatened, and the parts that are left in religion become a little crazier and a little more intense. And so that's what I think we've been seeing, just anecdotally based on my experience. I think that's what we're going to continue to see unless society breaks down and we don't have any more internet and we all become fundamentalists again.
Do you think the availability of the internet makes people more crazy, or it's just giving people the opportunity to find the crazy that's already inside of them and just give it a label?
I think both. I think you find an identity in a community that you wouldn't have found otherwise. And I think these people probably have a tendency toward crazy. But I think they definitely when they get together with their friends and bounce ideas off each other, I think it escalates. It's kind of like that one of the reasons YouTube is important is because you always have that one kid who's in his town in the South and doesn't have any voices telling him that what he believes is okay. And he would probably, before the days of the internet, he would keep it to himself, probably try to tell himself he doesn't doubt, and go through his life more or less being a Christian, and whatever's inside him just either festers or dies. And he can build on that and become more confident and find a community and stuff like that. Um, I think the same thing can happen, more unfortunate types of beliefs as well. Somebody who thinks, boy, the earth sure looks flat and has a contrarian stance that makes that feel satisfying to him, maybe would find a friend or two. Those ideas would linger inside. He quickly finds that there's very little social reward for bringing it up to other people, and it sits inside him or goes away. But on the internet, just like I think atheism has grown, a lot of other crazier ideas have grown. And of course, some Christian will just see this and say, hey, this just proves atheism is one more crazy, one more crazy irrational thing that people have drifted to now that, whatever.
So have you thought about doing debates? I think I've seen you say that you're against doing debates. You're not a big fan of debates.
I'm really not. And part of this it ties back to the question of how do you best untangle apologist arguments. And for me, it's not delving into the science, stuff like that. It's breaking them down and calling them out on their details. And that's really hard to do in a live format because gish galloping has almost become a trite thing to criticize. But it's almost like straw man. It's one of those words that people say it so much that even when it applies, I cringe when I hear it. But it's true. Live debate really rewards people who are fast talkers, think on their feet, know the rules of the format. William Lane Craig is basically this idea distilled into human form. He knows exactly how to time things, how to. He throws 50,000 assertions out in his rehearsed initial argument, and then keeps making snide sideways insinuations every time somebody doesn't address every single one of them, which they can't. And so I don't really particularly care for the format for that reason. And I think to really stop and unpack somebody the way you have to, you can't do it with equal time, and you need time to sit there and you see. I don't do a lot of research, but what I lack in that, I think I make up for in the labor of listening to somebody 50 times and thinking through what exactly he said and parsing out the language of it. But yeah, I think there can be value in it, but it's not my favorite format. I've probably done 3 things that can be construed as a debate. One of them was a formal debate on morality. I did one more just general talk about morality, and one more with somebody. He has something called Modern Day Debate now.
Yeah, James.
Yeah, I did one with him where he tried to argue a version of the Euthyphro dilemma, which, yeah.
So you said you re-listen to people's arguments over and over again, like 50 times, and rethink through it. Do you really enjoy doing that, or are you just cringing the entire time, just like, oh, I can't stand this?
I really do enjoy it. I take a lot of time writing my scripts. Having been an English major, I'm informally, just recreational, a bit of a writer. I like playing with language and making things flow well. And I like the nuance of language and everything like that. So just like I like constructing it well myself, I like picking other people's apart and finding the fault. Like anything else you really like to do, you have to be in the mood for it, and it can give you a headache. I can really enjoy the puzzle of picking through William Lane Craig, and then when I'm done, I don't want to see him again for another half a year or so, and then I'll be ready to give it another go. So yeah, I enjoy it, but it's like YouTubing in general. You enjoy it, but it kicks your butt.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, you're part of a YouTube group that started a YouTube conference, the Faithless Forum. How has that been going? What is your participation in that? And they've been doing it for like 1 or 2 years now?
Yeah, we just had our second earlier this year, and we're planning on having it go on an ongoing basis. So my role in it is I'm on the board, which I kind of stumbled into. because the history of this is a group of us just thought, hey, it'd be fun to all get together. And I don't even know if I had 1,000 subscribers when it first came up. And so, we're talking about Telltale, Holy Kool-Aid, Godless Engineer, all these people who, at that point, I felt like I was just in a room full of celebrities. And they're like, yeah, yeah, come along. And just in the process of it, I ended up in this inner circle organizing it. And so, um, yeah, I'm on the board. I kind of help organize it. And then I usually end up, because of that, being a speaker and a panelist. It's a really fun event. I think it's really good. We sold out very quickly last year or this year, and I think we resold out a few times over on people on the waiting list. And so we're trying to accommodate a few more people this year. I can't speak to many details yet. We're still working. But yeah, it's going really well. I think people really enjoy it because a lot of people connect with YouTubers on a level that they might not with like the really big celebrities. They hear our voices a little more often, can interact with us a little bit more. And so I think it's really exciting for people to come see us. And it's really exciting for us to see each other and just see the people who watch us. It's just a lot of fun. And Thomas Holy Kool-Aid, he's really good at capturing, everybody is, but I think he's really in tune with that. I think having been a youth leader or whatever he was, recapturing a lot of that feel of connectedness and kind of the good parts of church, making it into a very relational, very connected type of experience for everybody, versus like a bigger, fancier thing where you're just going to watch people talk about highfalutin things and stuff. So I think we have something really good going, and I think it's going to continue to grow and be successful over the years.
Yeah, I just found out about it a few months ago, and I signed up to the newsletter to be reminded when the new tickets start to sale. So I'm going to try and go next year when they do it. But yeah, I'm hoping because it seems like it has a much different atmosphere than the bigger atheist conferences, like the one at Las Vegas they just had, the CSI conferences, the ones with like Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris. Those are really fancy kind of. It's not as comfortable to be there. I don't think you kind of like. There's a lot of pressure because it's just so fancy.
Yeah, and you're okay. I'm not going to say this is what people are there for, but there's a feel of you're there to just listen to people talk about really smart things and give really great presentations. And at at Faithless Forum, it's more of just a community building thing. There are panels where people ask questions and stuff, but they're a lot more. They're not as much like ivory tower type topics as much as day to day boots on the ground things. Like we've done some about coming out to people as an atheist, what that experience is like, and just what it's like to be a YouTuber and practical advice. And so it's a lot more about finding things that people can hear and apply to help them cope with their daily lives as a non-believer, and then maybe how they can become an activist. And then a lot of it's just having fun as a group. We have goofy activities and we draw people from the stage up and everything. So it's a much different experience. I don't think there's an atheist convention or large scale meeting like it right now.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned that what was it? You said you have advice for content creators? Like what has had been in your experience the things that have helped you grow over time?
I would say the first thing is just persistence and making content that you really like. Um, I think from the very beginning, you need to find something that means something you just say, and be in tune with the community and I think what they want to hear. But first off, speak to your own experience and speak to what you know and what you feel passionate about, and what is going to be interesting to you to make. When you do that, I think you'll have to kind of get more intense on more closely in tune with what the community wants to hear from you and what's useful for them to hear. And that's something I've grown in as I hear feedback and I hear what people struggle with and everything. Um, but then also you need to be driven to make whatever you're going to make. If you every week or every 2 weeks, whatever schedule you do it on, if you can't feel really excited to say what you're going to say, whether 100 people look at it or 10,000 people or a dozen. I mean, it would be a bummer if this week I put out a video and 12 people watched it, but you have to want to put out what you put out and then be ready for the ups and downs. Sometimes you'll be really excited by the reception a video gets. Sometimes you're going to be disappointed. Almost every single time you're going to feel deflated after you put out a video because you got really worked up to the moment it's coming out. And whether it goes well or not, my Thursdays are an emotional and energy roller coaster. I go from being super excited to just deflated because I'm burnt out and now my emotions are letting out on me, or a video just fell a little flat or was kind of mundane and people didn't seem to think about it. And it's not, you don't want to stay parked on those thoughts and they're not healthy, but you have to know you're going to have them and you have to be prepared for them. And so you have to know that YouTubing is going to be a grind. It's going to be a really hard workload. You're going to be tired from doing it. You're not always going to feel like doing it. And it is going to put an emotional strain on you. And so just be ready to make good content, be very patient, know that it's going to take time to grow, and just be ready for the long haul. And other than that, I'd say practical advice would be make sure your audio is good first. In almost every case, script your stuff out really well. The reason I have a static face at this point, it started out kind of an identity thing, but now it's just become my character's thing. And it also lets me be more sarcastic and act things out through gestures that would look really bad if I tried to act with my face because I'm not a good actor. And so I can mime things with a blank face that look a little better than if I tried to actually act it out. But then also it lets me, I literally look at my screen. I have my script open on one half of the screen and my audio editor open on the other. And I just literally read, and I do it over and over again. And I generate this week. I made about a 14-minute video, and I generated an hour of audio that I had to go back and cut out. But that's all just to say script really well, I guess.
So is that suit you wear, is that does it get pretty hot in that suit? And you have like a bunch of lighting there too. Is it like a comfortable suit to wear?
It's fine. It's not my favorite. Uh, the outfit is literally just a fleece similar to this green thing I'm wearing, except it's a black fleece zip up, and then I have a jacket over it. And my costume has evolved over time. Just it's all literally stuff I already have and was already wearing, and I just tried different combinations of stuff.
You just go with that face mask all the time? It's your everyday routine?
Not the mask, no. But yeah, honestly, one of the big reasons for my costume is that I have something that zips all the way up my neck, so I can tuck the orange mask in there and have it just have a clean divide between my face and my costume. But yeah, it's fine. I film down in my basement of my house, and it's almost always nice and cool down there. And I do it for about 15, 20 minutes, and that's it.
Oh, at a time? So like, wow, you're doing that pretty often because you said you had like an extra hour of footage or several hours of footage.
Oh, no, no, no. That all gets trimmed. The audio gets packaged down to exactly what I want it. And then I act it out after that.
Does it
Because
take
I'm not really talking while I'm making those
Oh,
motions.
gotcha, gotcha. So
Yeah.
does it only take like a few takes to do the miming?
Yeah, generally I can get that down in one take. That's pretty easy now. Once the voice work's done, um, everything except editing is pretty quick.
Yes, cool. So what are you working on right now? You said you just started working on a video? You just finished working on a video before you came on here.
Yeah, I'm working on another dumb things people say to atheists. This one's going to be that saying, you can't see the wind, but know you can see the effects of the wind. Yeah, and then they compare that to, of course, you can't see God, but you can see the effects of God. And
Yeah.
so that's my next one. I'm going to be doing another response to my old pastor, who was the one I had worked for. Not not a terribly nice guy in my opinion, as far as what comes over the pulpit anyway. He says some things that are, to be frank, vile enough that I think they're worth addressing and worth not pulling punches on. So I'm going to be doing that probably next year, and sorry, next week. It won't be next year. And as far as long-term plans, I'm really, really trying hard to do more cartoons. I want to do more, celebrity Bible quiz. I have a few more ideas for those lined out. Um, I really want to start getting into the God and Jesus cartoons, but those are very hard to write. They take a lot of time, and assembling them takes a lot of time too. So I feel bad because Tony really likes playing God and he's really good at it. But I keep hanging things up on the writing part of the situation. So hopefully we can get into that.
Tony Reed.
Yeah.
Have you seen Jonathan Sheffield's his animations?
Which are those?
He's a Christian atheist who argues heavy into the biblical testimony, the New Testament, historicity of the New Testament stuff. He does some really cool animations, though. I really respect his work on that. If you haven't checked him out, I'd love to hear your thoughts on his animation skills.
Yeah, you should. If you don't mind, just send me a link to that after we're done here, and I'll
Absolutely,
go
we'll
check
do
it out.
for sure.
Yeah.
Because he got me into Phil Mora to teach me how to do animations too. I've been taking advice from his because his are just absolutely amazing. So uh, you said that what other stuff interests you than like YouTube? What do you do for fun?
Boy, not a lot. Just because my life is so compartmentalized around work and kids and stuff like that that um, YouTube gets crammed into all the time at this point. But I like getting out into the woods and hiking and stuff like that. Um, just randomly messing around with my kids and doing things with them. My kids have gotten me into Minecraft a little bit,
Oh,
which,
really?
yeah, it's a silly thing, but you know, it's a playing video games with your kids sounds kind of silly, like not quality time, but it's like sitting around the table playing a board game. We all get out our laptops and we sit in there talking about what we're building and we start talking and stuff like that. So if it's a way to have quality time with your kids and just kind of screw around and build stuff, hey, why not?
How old are your kids?
I have two teenagers, 16 and 18. I guess one's technically an adult now. And then I have a 10 and 11-year-old.
Wow, you have four kids. It's terrifying.
It's not too bad, really.
So when you
One
were
doesn't.
what?
Oh, one doesn't live at home anymore. Um, and like, I have. This is my second marriage, and so one's a stepchild, and three are, we're kind of mixed and everything like that, and so they're here and there at different times of the week.
Do they admire you for being a YouTuber, a big YouTuber?
Yeah, I think they do. They think it's kind of cool. Um, to varying degrees, they like my content or despise it, depending on where they still fall on their faith journey. But even, you know, and things get put in their head too by people who don't want to come talk directly to me. They talk to my kids instead, which I find a disgusting thing to do. But even the ones that lean toward Christianity, they're still starting to appreciate what I do or find it fun and will, you know, make comments, hey, you should do this or that or whatever. So it's getting better.
Yeah. Do you read any like books on atheism? Were you inspired by like the Hitchens, Harris, Dawkins, those kind of guys?
I've I've read some. I read The God Delusion mostly out of obligation. I
Obligation?
didn't. At this point, it's aged a lot. Um, the Moral Landscape. I've just. They don't really count as atheist books, but I think they function that way. Would be um, Bart Ehrman's books. Even though they're not targeted for atheism, I could not recommend them highly enough, especially How Jesus Became God. I apologize for not getting these titles right, and then misquoting Jesus. Um, to get a layperson's understanding about what the Bible, what its history is really like, and just at least somehow get your head around that and get rid of your preconceptions that there were four gospels written by witnesses and a bunch of letters written by Paul and all. When you get more to get more of a sense of that, that can really equip you better as an atheist, solidify your doubts. Or if you're not really a believer and you're honestly searching, I can't see how that wouldn't undermine your belief more than most other things. But honestly, I don't read as much when it comes to atheism as watch content, because I really think this is a very fluid, changing, ongoing conversation. And both the ideas are developing, but then how you communicate to Christians is changing so much that I don't think as big an icon as Dawkins is, I don't think repeating Dawkins is going to get you as much traction as being in tune with what daily content creators are putting out on YouTube, having that all kind of not quote one specifically, but gel in their mind, pick here and there little arguments and things you hear. And by the way, I would strongly welcome and recommend that anybody do that with my content and anybody else's, if I could speak for them, because that's really what I'm doing this for, is giving you maybe a way to say something, some language to borrow for conversations with other people. That's what dumb things people say to atheists is about. It's not just making fun of them, but being in tune with what I hear people saying to atheists, talking through why I think they say it, being cautious not to dig into their minds and make assumptions the way they do about us, but then just kind of maybe give you some sense of how to converse about it. I feel like somewhere along the lines there, I lost the track of where we're going, but yeah,
I,
it's more, I think it's more daily content, being in tune with the needs of what atheists need and then what speaks to Christians. So,
yeah, you said you like. Do you watch a lot of content on YouTube as like your kind of research? Who do you watch specifically? Do you watch a lot of Christians and atheists on both sides?
I mostly listen to atheists. Um, I'll listen to Christians if I need to or for a specific purpose, but I really don't even listen strategically as much as I just try to stay in on the conversation. And uh, I just tend to listen to whoever pops up in my feed or if I hear something's going on. The problem is there's so many people and I'm friends with a lot of them. And so it just kind of, as with everything with YouTube, it just depends on what comes to your attention because there's so much of it out there. Honestly, and this says, going back to earlier in our conversation, there's a certain amount of graciousness that you expect to give to the other side and certain amount of reasonable assumptions. And this sounds like it's violating that kind of general rule of conversation, but I very rarely, if ever, hear anything new or compelling or even fresh enough to keep me sitting through more than 10 minutes in Christian material, just because in my experience anyway, they just repeat the same things. And it's a very stagnant body of knowledge. And I started to come into tune with that even as a Christian. Things people say in videos today are almost precisely what I used to hear in like fifth and sixth grade when apologetics and things like that were first coming to my attention. So there's, with maybe a few revisions where they make allowances for things I've been hearing or whatever, there's almost nothing new. They're just beating the same dead thing over and over again.
Do you have a lot of like conversations with people in your life about things like where you get the inspiration for stupid things people say to atheists? Do you actually experience this in your everyday life?
Not in my personal life. People are pretty standoffish with me. Um, I don't know if I'm intimidating or
It's the beard. It's just too pretty.
yeah. Well, also, you know, Christians have this idea of atheists that we think XYZ, which they heard other Christians in church tell them that we think. We think the universe randomly came from nothing, that DNA fell together like a book falling from the sky, um, which I just tweeted about and called Ratheism. Um, that Christians sit around in church telling each other that we're going to be foiled by every stupid thing they say that we've heard them say 1,000 times. And so when they talk to, I'm not saying I'm brilliant or anything, but like most of us YouTubers, I'm a reasonably participant in the conversation, and they don't expect us to be that. And so when they come and throw you one of these flippant little things that we've heard 1,000 times and know how to deconstruct and debunk and could articulate better than they can, they'll dig in and give you a little resistance, but they don't want to hear it. And I don't know to what extent it digs at their faith or just violates their expectation for how easy the conversation was going to be, because that's what they keep telling themselves in church is this is going to, oh, you just tell an atheist this and they're stupid and blah, blah, blah. So I don't hear a lot, um, but I hear it circulated in the general conversation online. Again, my kids hear these things a lot and repeat them to me. And so I don't vicariously attack the people who speak to my kids through these videos, but what what they and other people, including people who send me emails and messages and stuff, hey, I get a lot of questions. Hey, how do I deal with this with my family? And I try to answer those to the best of my ability. Sometimes it can take a few weeks, and I feel bad about that, but I try to give some kind of advice on that because I think that's where this is really important. But all that stuff just gives me a sense of what people need, what they're being, what is coming at them from Christians in their life, what they feel surrounded by, um, what they're going to have trouble navigating without stepping on toes and upsetting somebody or incurring some form of verbal abuse. And so it all just feeds into my sense of how to address that and how can I most be helpful. And that's what I try to do. And
Is that
I
like your
think
main
that's
passion? Is that like when you're giving people a way to interact with the ones especially close to them in their lives to talk about atheism and try to avoid those like really confrontational interactions?
it really is, yeah. And that's where I said earlier, you have to do something you feel passionate about, but then you develop a sense of what the community needs. And I think that's where I've really grown, especially like within the last year and a half, is I'm starting to get a feel, I think anyway, unless I'm just dead wrong, but I'm starting to get some kind of sense of what is helpful for people to hear and what the average atheist just wandering out in the world can tend make use of, whether it's to cope internally or deal conversationally with other people. And so that's definitely what I feel most strongly about. Um, I think that's partly why I've drifted away from cartoons. I think they serve a function for taking God off a pedestal and taking a lot of the theology off a pedestal and showing inconsistencies, but they don't speak as directly to people's daily experience with theists around them. And also, honestly, 90% is just workflow. It's hard enough to crank out a video every week without doing something that involved. But yeah, I think I'd made a video about it too. It's called like "Look to the Helpers" or something like that. It was just it got low views. I expected it to, but that was just my way of saying, in the middle of some controversy within the community, hey, look, we should be here to present this to people. A lot of kids are coming to us who, sorry, excuse me, they don't have any other support network for this particular area of their life. It's not their parents are entirely unsupportive or not helpful, but there's some kind of crisis going on in them that they need to hear some adult voice speak to, and they need the kind of advice that their parents or uncles or whatever might give them on some other topic, but they're not going to find it here, and they really need that. And so we kind of become online parents to a lot of people, and to a point that is more substantial and more intense than I think a lot of people realize. And so I think we need to do our best to live up to that and to meet our responsibility to the people who come to us and really do. This isn't just an online activity. People really do take need to take what they hear from us out away from their viewing experience and use it in their lives. And so giving them something of substance, I think, is very important. And I think it's something we need to all try to do on some level.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things that most worries me is that there's a big responsibility in what we're saying because it provides a lot of insight into people that they're to things they're really dealing with in their lives, and you don't really know how that's going to affect people and how to how to deal with that responsibility and what you're supposed to do to responsibly express ideas is something that I have big questions about. Do you have any advice about how content creators can do that better?
It's really hard to say. I would honestly, if I were to say one thing, it would just be say whatever you have to say sincerely, make sure it's meaningful, and speak from your own experience and based on the understanding of what you could have used as an atheist or maybe what you might still be able to use on an ongoing basis. And be in tune with your audience, be listening to your audience, hear what they need. And I really wouldn't give super direct advice because honestly, the more variety there is out here, the better. I would rather me stay in near this 20,000 whatever subscriber range and have dozens of other people in similar or slightly higher, slightly lower, and have a variety of different types of messages presented in a variety of different types of ways so that new non-believers or doubt, especially isolated ones, can go through and find what speaks to them. I think I speak very intensely to certain people in a unique way, and I think other people speak to other people in a way that I simply don't. And so I think we really need that. So I wouldn't give advice so specific as we need to see this style of content. It would be more just really look inside yourself, have a gut check every once in a while, and make sure that you're not just going for cheap views. You're not stirring up controversy for attention, certainly, and you're at least just trying to do something meaningful or important. And so that's the best advice I could give.
Yeah, that's great advice too. I think that's fantastic. So we've been going for about an hour. I think it's a pretty good place to actually wrap up. It's great having you on. I really appreciate the conversation. And by the way, I really love your mug. That is an awesome mug. I have the same kind of mug.
Oh, you do? Cool. Yeah.
It's awesome.
Someone brought this back home for me from Germany once.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah.
Well, anyway, thanks for coming on. This was a great interview. I'm glad you came on and had a conversation with me.
Yeah. Thank you. I really enjoyed it. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, I'll talk to you later. I'll send you
All
the
right. Sounds
link
good.
to Jonathan Sheffield, and I'd like to hear your thoughts on him too.
Yes.
See you later.
Sounds good. I'll check it out. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.